The most dangerous prison has no bars, no guards, and no locked doors. It's built inside your mind, constructed from the very defenses you've created to survive. That high-paying job you sacrifice your health for, the relationship you maintain despite your emptiness, the social mask you never remove. These aren't achievements, they're walls in your psychological prison. Harvard researchers discovered something shocking. The brain's prefrontal cortex physically shrinks in people who suppress emotions. The 2023 Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine revealed that emotional repression increases disease risk by 67%. A University of Michigan study found that individuals rated as highly resilient paradoxically experience more severe mental breakdowns than those who process emotions regularly. The psychological armor you've built isn't protection, it's a cage. Every time you swallow anger to keep peace, bury grief to appear strong, or hide vulnerability to seem confident, you're adding another bar to your cell. The most disturbing part? You've mistaken this prison for safety. You've confused your chains for achievements. Carl Jung, the revolutionary psychologist who ventured deeper into the psyche than anyone before him, discovered something that upends everything we've been taught about emotional strength. The most powerful figures throughout history weren't emotionally invulnerable. They were masters of their vulnerability. Lincoln didn't overcome depression. He transformed it into unprecedented empathy. Mandela didn't suppress rage. He alchemized it into strategic patience. Frida Kahlo didn't hide her pain. She transmuted it into revolutionary art. History's most formidable minds weren't those who avoided breaking. They were those who learned to break magnificently. Their wounds weren't weaknesses, but doorways to extraordinary power. This pattern repeats across cultures and eras. Psychological integration, not invulnerability, creates true strength. The Japanese practice of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, transforming fractures into the most valuable part of the object. Neuroscience confirms your psyche works exactly the same way. A groundbreaking 2022 UCLA study revealed that individuals who integrate past trauma show 47% greater neural connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and limbic system than those who suppress it. This integration doesn't just heal wounds, it creates unprecedented psychological capabilities. By the end of this video, you'll understand the exact psychological mechanism that transforms vulnerability into power, why your unconscious sabotages your conscious goals, and the surprisingly simple practice Jung discovered that creates unshakable inner strength. But first, you need to understand the insidious trap that's ensnared most of modern society. The trap begins with a fundamental contradiction. Humans simultaneously crave authentic connection and fear genuine vulnerability. This paradox forces you to create what Jung termed the persona, a social mask designed to gain acceptance while hiding your true nature. The mask works brilliantly at first. It secures approval, advancement, and apparent safety. But the protection becomes the prison. The Harvard Grant study, the longest psychological research project in history, reveals a devastating pattern. The stronger your persona, the more profound your isolation. MRI studies show that maintaining social masks activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The psychological cost proves even higher. As your authentic self atrophies beneath the performance, your achievements feel increasingly hollow. The mask strategy ultimately backfires in three devastating phases. First emerges imposter syndrome, the gnawing anxiety that you'll be exposed as fraudulent. Next comes emotional anesthesia, the inability to feel genuine connection or satisfaction. Finally arrives what Jung termed shadow eruption. Everything you've disowned about yourself explodes in self-sabotage, addiction, unexplainable rage, or the infamous midlife crisis. The biological consequences are measurable. Stanford University researchers documented how persona maintenance increases stress hormones by 34%, accelerates cellular aging, and suppresses immune function. The psychological damage proves even more severe. Those living primarily through social masks report 58% higher rates of clinical depression and 63% higher anxiety than those living authentically. The most successful person often occupies the most elaborate prison. CEOs, celebrities, and high achievers frequently report the deepest sense of disconnection. Their accolades increase even as their authentic joy diminishes. Jung recognized this phenomenon as spiritual starvation amid material plenty, the peculiar emptiness that comes when external success divorces from internal truth. Achievement without authenticity becomes the ultimate golden cage. But the prison has a key. Jung discovered that escape begins with confronting what he termed the shadow, everything you've disowned about yourself. Most people fundamentally misunderstand the shadow, believing it contains only negative qualities: anger, selfishness, greed, lust. Jung recognized a far more profound reality. Your shadow holds not just your darkness, but your most extraordinary gifts, power, and capacity for authentic connection. When parents criticized your natural expressiveness, when teachers punished your creativity, when society rejected your uniqueness, you didn't eliminate these qualities, you buried them. They now operate beyond conscious control, emerging in self-sabotage patterns that seem incomprehensible, destroying relationships as they deepen, procrastinating before breakthroughs, repeatedly attracting partners who wound you in identical ways. These aren't character flaws, but shadow elements directing your life from underground. Jung articulated this phenomenon with piercing clarity. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What appears as external misfortune often reveals your shadow at work. The colleague who provokes disproportionate rage activates qualities you've denied in yourself. The opportunity you inexplicably avoid contains elements your unconscious fears. The romantic partner who repeatedly disappoints you mirrors your own disowned traits. History's most transformative figures didn't suppress their shadow, they integrated it. Steve Jobs harnessed his obsessiveness into revolutionary design rather than self-destruction. Martin Luther King channeled rage into strategic activism instead of hatred. Marie Curie transformed societal rejection into scientific breakthrough rather than defeat. Psychological transformation doesn't eliminate darkness, it transmutes it. Shadow integration represents humanity's most challenging psychological work. It requires confronting everything you've dedicated your life to avoiding: shame, rage, vulnerability, the terror of genuine exposure. It demands acknowledging that your carefully constructed identity isn't your authentic self, but an elaborate defense mechanism. It necessitates recognizing that qualities you despise in others reveal disowned aspects of yourself. Contemporary neuroscience validates Jung's revolutionary insights. Brain imaging studies at UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute reveal that shadow integration activates the medial prefrontal cortex while simultaneously calming the amygdala, precisely the neural signature associated with psychological resilience. A landmark 2021 study in the Journal of Affective Disorders documented how emotional integration reduces stress hormones by 43%, while enhancing cognitive flexibility and decision-making capacity. The neurological evidence proves irrefutable. Psychological integration creates power that compartmentalization cannot approach. But what does this integration process actually entail? How do you reclaim these disowned parts and transform them from saboteurs into allies? Jung pioneered specific techniques that convert fragmentation into wholeness. The first transformative practice is what Jung termed active imagination, structured dialogue with your unconscious. Unlike meditation, which aims to quiet mental activity, active imagination intentionally engages unconscious material. The protocol requires 3 steps. First, identify a shadow aspect manifesting in your life, perhaps recurring anger, self-sabotage patterns, or relationship difficulties. Second, visualize this element as a figure or symbol. Third, engage it directly through written dialogue, asking, "What function do you serve in my life? What are you protecting me from? What do you need to transform?" The second integration technique Jung developed is emotional archaeology, systematically excavating triggers to their developmental origins. When rejection feels annihilating rather than merely disappointing, when criticism provokes shame rather than reflection, when conflict triggers terror rather than discomfort, these disproportionate reactions aren't responding to present circumstances. They're reactivating unresolved developmental wounds. This archaeological process involves precise steps. First, identify the emotional trigger with scientific specificity. Exactly what activated the disproportionate response. Second, trace the emotional signature to its earliest appearance. When did this particular feeling first emerge in your developmental history? Third, bring adult consciousness to the original wound. What did that younger version of you need that remained unmet? This isn't about assigning blame, but retrieving emotional capacities that were prematurely suppressed. The third integration methodology Jung pioneered is projection retrieval, reclaiming qualities you've externalized onto others. The psychological principle operates with mathematical precision. The intensity of your reaction to someone directly correlates to how strongly that quality lives disowned within you. The arrogance that provokes irrational rage reflects denied ambition. The neediness that triggers disgust mirrors disowned vulnerability. The confidence you pathologically admire reveals suppressed personal power. These integration practices aren't self-help techniques, but psychological technologies developed through decades of clinical application. Their effectiveness has been scientifically validated. A landmark Harvard longitudinal study tracking shadow integration practitioners documented profound transformations. 68% reduction in self-sabotaging behaviors, 74% increase in relationship satisfaction, 47% improvement in creative output, and perhaps most significantly, the capacity to maintain psychological equilibrium amid external chaos. This last finding proves particularly significant. Authentic psychological freedom doesn't mean controlling your environment or avoiding triggers, an inherently limited strategy. It means developing what Jung termed the internal locus of evaluation, the capacity to maintain centeredness regardless of external conditions. The integrated individual isn't destabilized by criticism or inflated by praise. They've developed something infinitely more valuable than external validation: internal coherence. Integration doesn't merely reduce suffering, it liberates extraordinary power. Consider the enormous psychological energy required to maintain fragmentation, constantly monitoring your image, suppressing unacceptable emotions, managing others' perceptions, and maintaining internal walls between compartmentalized aspects of self. Neuropsychological research from Stanford's Center for Compassion documents how this compartmentalization depletes cognitive resources by up to 62%. When this energy becomes liberated through integration, it becomes available for creation, connection, and authentic contribution. Despite these documented benefits, psychological integration remains uncommon. Most individuals choose familiar imprisonment over frightening freedom. They accumulate external validation that never addresses internal emptiness. They perfect personas that secure approval while preventing authentic connection. They pursue success metrics that systematically distance them from their genuine needs and values. The consequence manifests as what Thoreau termed quiet desperation. achieving socially sanctioned goals that bring no fulfillment, maintaining relationships devoid of intimacy, and ultimately reaching life's end with the haunting recognition of having never authentically lived. Jung identified this as modern humanity's central tragedy. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, yet this privilege remains unclaimed by the overwhelming majority. Why do so few undertake this transformative journey despite its proven benefits? The answer lies in what Jung identified as the provisional life, the seductive illusion that authentic existence can be postponed until specific conditions are satisfied. The unconscious bargain sounds reasonable. I'll start living genuinely once I've achieved financial security, once I've secured professional status, once I've established the perfect relationship. This psychological postponement becomes perpetual as the conditions continuously evolve, forever receding like the horizon. Jung's most liberating and simultaneously most terrifying discovery reveals the ultimate psychological truth. There exists no prerequisite for authentic existence. No achievement will ever make integrity safe. No external validation will eliminate the vulnerability inherent in genuine expression. No amount of preparation will remove the uncertainty of authentic living. The security you seek through postponement is fundamentally illusory. The only pathway to psychological freedom begins precisely where you stand, with everything you've been avoiding. It requires turning toward discomfort rather than away from it, embracing uncertainty rather than demanding guarantees, choosing truth over comfort, growth over safety, reality over illusion. This isn't spiritual philosophy, but psychological necessity, the only empirically validated path to genuine fulfillment. This transformative choice rarely occurs voluntarily. Jung documented how most individuals begin integration only when their provisional life becomes existentially unbearable, when achievement no longer masks emptiness, when anxiety penetrates all defenses, when relationships disintegrate despite perfect compliance with social expectations. Psychiatrists term this necessary suffering, the breakdown that precedes breakthrough. The psyche's collapse becomes its liberation. The prison wall transforms into the doorway. Authentic integration manifests through specific practices rather than intellectual understanding. The process begins with radical honesty, acknowledging your genuine experience first to yourself, then to carefully selected others. It advances through emotional literacy, developing sophisticated capacity to identify, express, and regulate feelings without suppression. It culminates in psychological differentiation, precisely distinguishing between your authentic responsibility and what belongs to others. This developmental sequence proceeds systematically rather than haphazardly. Each integration creates capacity for the next. Each reconciled fragment enables further reconciliation. The progression isn't linear, but spiral. You'll encounter familiar challenges repeatedly, but with progressively greater consciousness. Success isn't measured through feeling better, but seeing clearer. Developing capacity to recognize patterns before being unconsciously ensnared by them. Contemporary neuroscience provides biological validation for Jung's psychological model. Integration literally rewires neural architecture, strengthening connections between the analytical prefrontal cortex and the emotional limbic system. This creates what neuropsychologists term vertical integration, the capacity to process emotional data without being hijacked by it. Functional MRI studies document these structural changes emerging within 8 weeks of consistent integration practice. The psychological transformation becomes literally visible in modified brain structure. This integration process embodies what Jung identified as authentic psychological freedom, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of genuine choice. The integrated individual isn't immune to pain, loss, or rejection. They're liberated to respond authentically rather than reactively. They maintain centeredness amid chaos. They transform suffering into meaning rather than being diminished by it. This represents freedom's ultimate expression, not controlling circumstances, but choosing your relationship to them. The neuropsychological literature documents how integration manifests in measurable capacities: dramatically enhanced creativity, more authentic relationships, consistent access to flow states, reduced defensive reactivity, and accelerated learning. Perhaps most remarkably, integrated individuals demonstrate the seeming paradox of heightened emotional sensitivity coupled with increased emotional stability. Precisely the combination that enables profound empathy without emotional overwhelm. The most fundamental transformation occurs at the existential level. Integration resolves the core psychological schism between your social performance and your authentic nature. This alignment creates what Jung termed individuation, the emergence of psychological uniqueness through reconciliation of fragmented aspects. The mask and the face behind it merge into coherent expression. The external persona and the internal reality achieve unprecedented harmony. The divided self becomes whole. This understanding places you at a decisive psychological crossroads. One path continues the provisional existence, postponing authenticity until some hypothetical future when vulnerability feels safe. The other initiates integration now, turning toward what you've been avoiding, reclaiming what you've denied, confronting what you've feared. The first path leads to what existentialists term despair, achieving external success while experiencing internal emptiness. The second leads to what Jung called the privilege of a lifetime, becoming your authentic self. The ultimate psychological paradox reveals itself. The security you seek through avoidance emerges only through confrontation. The strength you hope to develop through invulnerability manifests only through integration. The freedom you crave through control materializes only through surrender to what is. The very aspects you're fleeing contain precisely what you're seeking. Your imprisonment and liberation are constructed from identical psychological material. Integration begins with a single, transformative recognition. You already possess everything required for this journey. The question isn't your capacity, but your commitment. Not tomorrow when circumstances appear perfect. Not next year when you feel adequately prepared. But now, precisely as you are, with everything you've been avoiding, this moment contains all you need. The journey unfolds naturally once initiated. Each integration reveals the next necessary step. Each acknowledged truth illuminates further truth. Each reclaimed fragment strengthens capacity for further reclamation. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step into authentic consciousness. Integration manifests through specific daily practices. Morning shadow journaling illuminates unconscious patterns before they dictate your day. Midday emotional check-ins prevent suppression from accumulating. Evening reflection identifies where fragmentation occurred and how integration can proceed. These aren't spiritual aspirations, but psychological technologies with measurable outcomes. The most extraordinary revelation from Jung's work remains this. The key to unshakable strength isn't becoming invulnerable, it's becoming integrated. Your fractures aren't flaws to eliminate, they're portals to unprecedented power. Your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's the foundation of genuine connection. Your pain isn't punishment, it's the alchemical fire transforming consciousness into gold. If this message resonates with you, if you're ready to transform fragmentation into power, subscribe to this channel. Like this video, share it with those who need this message, and tell us in the comments. What aspect of yourself are you finally ready to reclaim? What psychological prison are you prepared to escape? Your journey toward wholeness begins with your next choice. Choose integration.